Okay, welcome back, everybody. Let's get started with some meditation. So go ahead and set up your posture, having your back as straight as possible. And your body relaxed. Letting your shoulders drop. And taking some deep breaths to settle. And today I'm going to let you set your motivation. So set a very positive intention for participating in this class today. And make sure it's wider. It's both for yourself and others. And then I'd like you to bring your awareness to your breathing at your nostrils. So without thinking about it, just observing the breath as it goes in and as it goes out, and not losing attention during the pauses between the in-breath and the out-breath, staying with the whole cycle. Now, while you're watching your breath, I'd like you to shift your attention to the awareness, the mind that is aware of the breathing. So simply the fact that you are conscious means that awareness is present. So allow the breath to go into the background and awareness to come forward. Simply being aware that you are present, that there is a watcher that exists, an observer. And it's very subtle. It's not easy to see. Because it's always present. At the same time, it's very simple. Being aware that you are aware. There's a stillness to it and a clarity. If you can imagine, it's similar to if you were looking at an aquarium of fish. But now instead of watching the fish, you look at the water in which the fish exist. This is the awareness of the mind that allows the fish, the content, to fade. It becomes aware of the space of the mind. And now from this basis of awareness, staying with this clarity, this stillness, start to allow, to open to whatever is arising within this space. So it could be physical sensations, it could be sounds, it can be thoughts, it can be emotions. But from this place of observing, notice the constantly changing nature of whatever is occurring in the mind and in the body and in the environment. At first, it might seem blank, but just wait. And being open to whatever is coming into your mind without following it, even if it's chatter about how you're doing in this practice. Just notice that and let it change without losing the awareness of being present. And then slowly starting to come out of your meditation. Okay, so let's start with some review. Yesterday we went over this diagram of how perception happens. So we receive external stimulus in the form of sound waves or light particles, and then certain things happen within our senses, and our brains get stimulated, and then our minds create an image of the sense impressions that we have received based on all our other experiences of all the other senses, sense impressions that we've had, as well as the things that we've learned, as well as our culture, as well as our personality, as well as our past karmic seeds. All of these then come together to create this image that is in our mind. And then what we do is that we take that image and we project it back onto the sense impressions that we've received. And we believe that what we have created in our minds is an accurate representation of what exists in reality. But unfortunately, our minds have ignorance. They don't have a correct perception of the way things actually exist. So when we believe that what we are seeing in our minds is an accurate reflection of what is out there, it's not true. Okay, it's not necessarily accurate because of the ignorance in our minds. And one of the things that, one of the ways in which we are ignorant is actually believing that things exist separately from our perception of them. Okay, so we're starting to learn in quantum mechanics, so at a very, very tiny, very subatomic level, that the observation of a subatomic particle, where it is, okay, where its position is in space, is actually in more of a field. So it's in what, like a probability field. So it has a probability of existing in a certain place until it's actually observed. And then once it is observed, it is, then it exists in that place. And so they're starting to see that actually our consciousness of things influences very much what exists. Okay, so this line that we talked about yesterday between what is out there and what is in here is not necessarily so solid. Okay, so then we talked about this in terms of difficult emotions like anger. Okay, so we talked about the fact that one of those arrows, you know, that what we do to situations, so we have a perception of a situation, somebody says something, we see, you know, we experience certain conditions with our senses, and then our minds exaggerate the negative aspects and make it seem worse than it actually is, because every situation has both positive and negative aspects. And so we make the negative worse, and then we feel like we can't tolerate the situation, the object, or the person. So then we have a wish to either harm it or to get away from it or them. Okay, so it's because we have this perception of this exaggerated negative thing, then we start to do certain actions to try to separate us from it. Okay. So this creates disturbance in the mind. This causes us to harm others, which then results in our suffering. So we talked about antidotes. So the first antidote we talked about is patience. So developing a calm and peaceful state of mind, that when difficult situations occur, we don't get upset. It doesn't disturb our mind, okay? We stay calm, we stay peaceful, we're able to more effectively then deal with the situation. And the other antidote is, especially when it's in relationship to someone who is difficult, a person who is difficult, if we have an attitude of loving kindness toward that person, then we cannot want to harm them at the same time that we love them and want them to be happy. Those are two opposites. So developing loving kindness for all beings, then even when they harm us, or even when they do things that we find difficult to bear, we aren't going to turn around and want to hurt them as a result. So other antidotes we talked about, thinking about the disadvantages of anger so that you want to work with it and try to find patience instead of anger, maintaining a relaxed and happy mind that is more able to tolerate difficult situations, knowing when we're particularly triggered, knowing when in those situations which tend to make us angry already so that we can be prepared, we can respond differently. Remembering positive aspects of difficult people and situations. So we talked about learning from them. We talked about burning off negative karma. We talked about how they, they can teach us a lot of times. We can develop lots of compassion for those people, because oftentimes difficult people are coming from a place of their own afflictive emotions. And then the last one is recognizing how our minds create the experience of anger by exaggerating the negative aspects. Okay. So today I wanted to start off talking about this process. So we're back to the second noble truth, the cause of suffering. How does suffering arise in us? And we have the process of ignorance is combined with a feeling. Okay, in our minds, we have this ignorance about a misperception about how reality exists. Plus, we have a very simple feeling whenever we contact something. We have a positive, negative, or neutral feeling to anything that we contact. So if I walk into a room and I meet someone for the first time, immediately there is on a very quickly, on a very subtle level, I have either a feeling of wanting to go toward them, wanting to go away from them, or not really having much of a reaction at all. Okay. And the ignorance that I have is a belief that this person is out there, separate from my mind, separate, independent from all other causes and conditions. So when I put that together, that ignorance together with that feeling, then I have the perception, misperception, that the feeling is in the person. That the reason why I had this negative feeling toward that person is because of who they are. Okay. And that's actually a misperception, because actually the feeling was something that arose in my own mind. Okay. And then because I believe that that feeling came from that external thing, I don't recognize that it came from my own mind, then afflictive emotions arise. Like I want to push that person away, okay, because they are the source of my discomfort. Okay, instead of recognizing that my discomfort arose in my mind. So then afflictive emotion, rejection, comes in, and then I do a harmful action. I turn away from them. I'm not open to them. Maybe in more extreme situations, I say something mean to them to get them away from me. Okay, and then that harmful action creates the causes for me to experience suffering in the future. Even in the moment, maybe my rejection of them or being mean to them creates a situation in which they're mean to me, or they talk behind my back, or they reject me in some way. Okay, so this process of having this response to the situations in our life actually perpetuates our suffering. It creates a situation in which we continue to create the causes, to then the ignorance stays, we have the negative experiences, and then we have the misperception again, and then we have the afflictive emotion, and then we do harmful actions, and then we continue to create suffering. So this whole process is actually what keeps us stuck in this cycle of samsara. Samsara is the cycle in which we actually, all of our perceptions are ruled by this ignorance. And because of this ignorance, then we continue to create the conditions for us to suffer. We instead of creating connection and love with others to create positive experiences, instead of doing actions that are beneficial and virtuous to others, we don't have those experiences in ourselves. Okay, and it's all starts with this ignorance, this misperception of reality. So we've talked a little bit about this so far, this ignorance, this misperception, particularly in relationship to ourselves, that somehow ourselves exist as independent, separate people and separate from everybody else. When in fact, if we start to explore more deeply, we see that there is a lot more interconnection, a lot more relatedness. In order for us to exist, to even be here, for me to be sitting here, right, doing this, activity with you of teaching, so many causes and conditions, so many other people. You can just see behind me, I have these amazing teachers. The big guy behind me is Lama Tsongkhapa. He was a Tibetan, one of the founder of this particular school of Tibetan Buddhism. And then I have His Holiness over here, and I have Lama Zopa Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe, and they all, their presence is the only way that I could even know what I know and be able to present it to you. And all those texts that you see behind me, those are all half of them are the words of the Buddha, so Shakyamuni Buddha, and all the causes and conditions that went into this enlightened being coming into the world. And then a bunch of the other texts are all the commentators. So all the other beings who practiced and realized the teachings of the Buddha for the last 2,600 years. Okay, so all these causes and conditions for this, and then that doesn't even talk about all the food that supported my body and all the clothing that protected it, and all the people that built this place and all the parents of the people. I mean, you can do a meditation on that. But then, so what it does is it starts to dissolve the sense of me as someone who is somehow separate from everybody else, from everything else, that somehow I'm on my own in some way. And that misperception, then when I start to interact with the world, if I feel that disconnection, that somehow they're out there, then it's much easier for this anger to arise, and also for attachment to arise. So attachment or obsession or excessive desire is when I feel like I get a positive feeling, and I feel like in order for me to be happy, I have to get that thing, right? I have to get that thing from the external environment and bring it to me in order to be happy. Instead of recognizing that it's much more interconnected, and that happiness arises in my mind. It is the result of a karmic seed that I have planted, as well as the conditions. Okay. All right. So if we wanted to go to the root of this, okay, to the root of this suffering that we've created, then we need to look at that ignorance and try to create in our minds an experience of the wisdom that removes that ignorance, okay, that stops that ignorance from happening. Okay, so then we do we look at something called emptiness or dependent arising. So thinking about concrete things, and we will eventually, in the next course, we'll start applying this to the self. But for now, I think it's easier to apply it to things. So dependent arising is one of the main proofs for emptiness, okay? And I'll explain what that is. What dependent arising is that nothing exists independently or permanently. Now, we already talk about impermanence, the fact that anything that is the product of causes and conditions is not permanent. It is constantly changing, okay? It is impermanent. And nothing exists independently, in the sense that everything requires both causes and conditions in order to exist, okay? There is nothing that just shows up, without any cause coming into, effect. My cup of tea has so many causes and conditions that go into it being here, right? All the herbs, all the water, the heating of the water, the cup itself, okay? Everything that exists is the product of causes and conditions. And because things exist dependently and not independently, they have no absolute reality or inherent existence on their own. And mind is one of the causes of existent things. Okay, so let me give you an example of this. Let's say that we're talking about a song, okay? So a song is created by musicians, okay? So in order for a musician to create a song, they have to have an idea of the song, and then all the causes and conditions have to go into the musicians producing the song. Now, then let's say they record it. They record it on a CD. Okay, so there's a process in which they create these sound waves, and then it's etched, on this CD. And then that CD, so now we have to start asking ourselves, if there is an absolute concrete external song that exists, where does it exist? Okay, does it exist in the minds of the musicians? Does it exist in the sound waves? Does it exist on the CD? Is that where the song is? Okay, but that is a CD. That's plastic, right? That's not a song. That's not what we think of when we think of a song. Okay, so let's say we put it into a player now, a CD player, and the sound waves start, coming into the air, right? And I hear it, through my headphones or in my ear. And then in my head, I create this image of a song. So where is the song? Is the song in the airwaves? Is the song in my, the movement of the bones in my ear? Is the song in my mind? It couldn't just be in my mind, because it also was dependent on the external conditions of the musicians and their ideas and the CD and the player and the sound waves, okay? So the song doesn't exist in any one single absolute concrete place. It exists as a dependent arising, okay? Which also includes my mind labeling that whole process a song. So what this does is it starts to break up this idea that that reality exists, that there are concrete, separate, outside, absolute things that exist that are somehow passively expressing themselves to me. In fact, I participate in the labeling of those things, in the bringing together of those causes in order for something to exist. Okay, so then this belief that somehow there is someone who is out there who is external, right, that is doing harm to me, and then I should hate them, doesn't make any sense, because the whole experience of that person and me and the feeling of anger are a dependent arising, and my mind participates in that. Okay, so let's look at the next slide. So emptiness, this, you may have heard this term before in Buddhism. Emptiness is the fact that things are empty of existing in the way that they appear. Okay, so because, back to this perception thing, how we believe that the image in our minds is how things exist externally, okay? And actually that appearance that comes into our minds is what our mind has created. It's not an accurate necessarily. It's also, it definitely has aspects, but it's not an accurate reflection of what is actually existing out there, okay? And so emptiness, but it does appear to our minds as if they exist separately, right? As if there is an objective out there, separate existence, okay? That things exist concretely, unchanging, and separate from my mind and separate from everything else, right? I believe that this, lid or this cup exists as an independent thing, okay? Because it looks that way to me. I can't see all the causes and conditions that went into it, okay? If I could see that, every time I looked at this cup, then I wouldn't be so attached to trying to hold on to this cup, okay? So emptiness is empty of existing in the way they appear. And when we recognize that things are empty, that how they appear to our minds is not how they exist, they become less solid. They become more like an illusion or a dream, okay? In the sense that an illusion or a dream is something that is happening more in our minds than in some concrete reality. Like if you think of when you're dreaming, you wake up, okay, so you have a dream. Let's say you have this whole dream of a whole life, and you get born and you get married and you have kids, and and then your kids pass away, or you get all upset and it's a horrible situation, and then you wake up and you realize that it was just a dream, okay? That it was all in your mind, okay? So actually, when we start to recognize how our minds participate in our reality, we start to see that much of how we interpret things is actually our interpretation. It's like a dream, okay? But unfortunately, because of our ignorance, we tend to see things as so real, like that life actually happened. Okay, now it isn't completely a dream, right? Because we do have a sense of, we experience pain, we experience pleasure, okay? Things are affected by cause and effect. Cause and effect do happen. In dreams, cause and effect doesn't necessarily function, but in what we call reality, it does, okay? So it's like a dream or like an illusion. And what Lama Zopa says is that the difference between the way that we perceive things, let me so you can see my hands. The difference between the way that we perceive things as concrete, absolute, self-existent, inherently existent, existing from their own side, these are all synonyms, all ways of saying how we see reality, and how they actually exist as barely there. It's as if they are non-existent, like a dream or like an illusion. That's the difference, the huge amount between how we see things, how we believe their appearances, and how they actually exist. It's so close to that they're barely there. Okay, now we don't want to go all the way off into this belief that, oh, everything is a dream, nothing matters, no cause and effect, we don't have to behave ethically because it doesn't matter anyway. We don't want to go all the way to that extreme. okay? But we do want to loosen things up a little bit, right? Like this idea of the song. So where is the song? If the song is on the CD, then of course I have to have lots of CDs. But even in our modern, our modern way of looking at things, we don't, this data, MPs, on, somehow now the song is on this little, thumb drive, or even if we download it, it's somewhere in a cloud. It's like, and a cloud has this illusion of very, barely being there. But if you're, if you know computers, it's actually data on a hard drive. But even hard drives are starting to be even more, ethereal, more and more subtle, actually, more atomically, much more subatomically. Their basis is much more like that. So when we start to recognize this, that our mind participates in our reality, then when we change our mind, we change our reality. Okay, now that's a hard one to hear, isn't it? Because we are really, really, really stuck in this belief that, oh, things really are the way they are, and my mind is somehow over here. And you're talking crazy, you're talking like if I just think really hard, then everything else changes, right? And I'm not saying that, okay? I'm not saying that somehow my mind, I can sit here and go, oh, that door is green, that door is green, that door is green, when it's actually red, right? I can't do that. It's impossible, because my mind is only part of it, okay? The causes and conditions that go into the door being red, like the paint and the people who painted it and the other minds, they also exist. But my mind is also present within that, okay? So we just start to break things up as well. My interactions with that door, even what red is. I mean, when we talk about color blindness, I was watching this thing this morning about when is red red. We don't necessarily know that what I say is red is what somebody else says is red, especially if they're colorblind, right? If they see red as green, then they could be looking at all these red things and be seeing green things, and I wouldn't necessarily know it unless we could test it, okay? So anyway, so back to, let's just look at this one more time. Okay, so if we were to change this ignorance into wisdom, the wisdom that sees things as they actually are, then we would interrupt this whole cycle of creating suffering. We would see that my feeling that is happening in response to this situation, first of all, the thing that I am having this feeling from is constantly changing. It's barely there. And my feeling is coming from my own mind. And so then I have a choice. Am I going to respond to that feeling or not? Okay, I can decide. Oh, and if in that moment when I contacted that thing, that feeling arose, it doesn't mean that in the next moment a different feeling might arise. Okay, it's very possible, right? I could like someone one moment and not like them the next moment, and not really care about them the next moment. It's this constantly changing thing. So then my misperception of somehow the feeling coming from that thing disappears, because it's like, what do you mean? Where, how can you say that it's actually in that situation? And then my afflictive emotions start to break up. I am less likely to continue to be angry about something, or continue to really obsess about wanting something, right? And then I don't act on those. I don't carry resentment. I don't carry grudges. I don't, get back at people. I let things go, much more easily, much more simply, when I start to see this flowing nature, this participating nature of how things exist. Okay, so that's my introduction to emptiness, and please, emptiness is one of the most complex concepts in Buddhism, and it is very much opposite to how we have experienced the world. We have, and His Holiness said this once, we have never experienced the world in any other way other than as things existing inherently, separately, as they appear, as unchanging. And so to bring in this concept through our reasoning and say, no, things don't really exist that way, it takes time to get used to that idea. You have to think about it, you have to analyze it, you have to test it, you have to contemplate it, you have to study it, you have to learn about it. And then it can start to shake things up a bit. Okay. So yeah, if you have some questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and I'll see if I can answer them.
Please write down your questions, especially perhaps those of you who haven't asked before. Okay, there's one question here. I will unmute Akansha. You can ask your question now.
Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Hello. So I was struggling a little bit during the meditation this morning when you asked us to be aware of who's being aware of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So one on a cognitive level, is there like an awareness behind an awareness behind an awareness infinitely? And the second question is, who is then being aware of being aware? I think the second question is more to do with practical, because I was not able to really grasp that.
Okay. So, and then who is being aware? So, in fact, what happens is that we can only have one thing in our main consciousness at a moment. Okay, so which means that when we are doing this awareness of awareness, we're actually going back and forth very quickly between being aware. Okay, so right now I'm aware of you, and then in the next moment I am aware that I am aware. Okay, but I am remembering actually that previous moment of being aware of you. And then I go back to just being present, open to whatever is happening, and then I know that I was aware. So it's not layers that go back and back, it's actually moments that alternate.
So then if these alternations become really rapid, till they are almost merged to a point, is
Right.
that what we're trying to achieve?
Yes, exactly. And then who is being aware? This goes back to when we were talking about the mind and the fact that there doesn't have to be a who in order for this process to take place. We can have awareness, we can have a remembering of the previous moment of awareness, so that awareness of awareness, then we can have awareness, and all that can operate without there being a central determining figure that says, now be aware of this, like that. We don't need that. Just like a big city doesn't need to be telling a taxi driver to be a taxi driver. A taxi driver can go around being a taxi driver, and Delhi, Delhi can function without there being a single, person or thing or being or entity or self or I that says go operate as a taxi driver. We can have awareness, but the thing is that we often identify that as a self, right? We label that as a self, but it doesn't necessarily have to be present. It can function without it.
I have a follow-up in light
Sure.
of, so in light of what we just discussed about emptiness, that everything is interrelated. So then what is what is being aware, and what is the thing that is being aware of? I'm sorry, I'm not able to articulate this very well.
So it's the mind, okay? We can say it's the mind. We can label that where these processes are happening is the mind. But then you can't give any concrete reality to the mind either, right? You have to look at the mind as well as a dependent arising, as also empty, as empty of any inherent existence, or as existing from its own side, separate from its causes and conditions. So the answer is that the mind exists, right? Attention exists, awareness exists, but all of those things also are dependent arisings. They don't exist absolutely in any way. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, there's one person who has a question by not Mike, so I will read out the question. It says, you said the mind participates in our perception of reality, but surely there are aspects of reality that are not the domain of the mind. Comment, please.
Well, according to Buddhism, no, consciousness participates in every aspect of reality. And sometimes the question comes that, well, what if we imagine a time on the earth when there were no beings, you know, there was no life, there was only inanimate matter. So then there were no sentient beings. So how could you say there was that there was consciousness present, a mind that was participating? And in Buddhism, we say that's not possible, that even if there weren't necessarily human beings or even life as we know it, there were still sentient beings that existed. So consciousness has always been present in the universe. So there is never a commonplace thing that exists in which consciousness has not participated.
No other questions, Drolma. Does anyone else have any questions? You can type it out now, please. Okay, there's one here. I will unmute Sandra. You can now ask your question.
Hi. Thank you so much. I love the mind. And I know this is a crazy question because I think it's just a loop, but if consciousness has always existed and our minds are beginless and endless, but there is such a thing as cause and effect, who created consciousness or what? Or does it matter?
Yeah, so no, it's a fine question and it's a good one. So if we say that something has always existed, we cannot say that there was ever a moment in which it was created, because in order for it to be created, it would have had a moment in which it did not exist. Okay, so that's part of it. The other part of it is one of the logical reasons why they say there is no such thing as a first cause or a creator. One of the reasons is that is because in order for something to be the cause of something else, okay, it cannot be just show up, right? Be permanent, not be the effect of something else, okay? Because if something were a first cause, it would not be the effect of something else. Then how could it become a cause for something else to exist? Because you're talking about something that is unchanging, permanent, without cause, okay, always existing, absolute. How could it would be unable to create something else out of itself. It would be stuck, it would be static, it would be absolute. Because in order for a cause to become an effect, it has to change in some way. like the seed has to change into a sprout, right? So a cause has to be able to change in order to be the cause of something else. So to have something that is not an effect be a cause of something else doesn't make any sense. So then cause and effect become beginningless in that way, always existing, infinite, never beginning, never ending.
So this is the linchpin of Buddhism, because one, there's no creator, because
Right.
that wouldn't be possible, because it's not a static, there's no beginning mark. Two, it's linked to all action, so all action is beginningless and endless. And that means for us humans, reincarnation is inevitable because our consciousness is beginningless and endless.
Yes.
I think I'm getting this somehow.
Yay!
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good question.
Okay, we have another one from Sola and Ziva, so you can now ask your question.
Hi, thank you. Nice haircut, Venerable.
Thank you.
I'd just like to ask, so in the first, so given that ignorance plus a feeling is the first sort of experience of suffering, I wanted to just understand, so two parts. Firstly, is there any other initial experience we get other than feeling, feeling of being attracted or neutral or not wanting it? Is there any other experience, or should we always expect that to be the first experience of
Yeah.
what we
perceive?
what we perceive? And then
Yeah.
secondly, just from that question, then if that is true, that it's always feeling that we first perceive, how can we practically be acutely mindful of that first? It sounds like that'll be easy to learn to, if you're always just mindful of that, just change that.
So actually when you start to go more deeply into mind and mental factors, they talk about something called 5 omnipresent, so always present functions of the mind anytime that we interact with anything in consciousness, whether it's a sense consciousness or a mental consciousness. And the first one includes contact, and feeling is another one of them. Another one of them is intention, and another one is attention. And then I don't remember the 5th.
Discrimination?
Discriminate? I'm not sure if that's it. Are you sure that's it?
Not 100%. I can Google it.
Yeah. If you want to look that up, the 5 omnipresent mental factors. It probably in, studybuddhism.com. Anyway, so it's actually 5 things that are happening all at the same time. And then your second question is that we have to have very, very powerful, focused minds in order to become aware of that first moment when those things are happening. It's easier to become aware further down about the 3rd step after we become aware of the misperception that we have of the belief that the feeling is in the person, okay, or in the thing. That it's easier to catch that. And it's also easier to catch when the arising of the difficult emotions happens. So detecting anger and detecting attachment, obsessive desire, is actually easier to become aware of in meditation sooner. And it's only when we get really, really good at shamatha and really, really good at mindfulness that we can start to see where the ignorance and the feeling at that moment that they arise. But that doesn't mean that we can't meditate on emptiness and start to sort of pick away at that ignorance. And eventually what we do in meditation on emptiness, on this dependent arising, is that we start to interrupt that cycle without having to even catch it at the moment that it happens. We have this powerful experience. Eventually we get a direct experience that things don't exist in that way. And we do that through reasoning, through meditation, through familiarization. We get used to that. And then even when the feeling arises, we totally recognize that it doesn't exist in that way, so we don't have the misperception. It won't come. So we don't necessarily have to be aware at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I guess all I need to wrap my head around is, I thought it would be easier as in it's always feeling, which is the first experience. But yeah, it's because I guess they just posted up the 5 or 6, can't see.
Should be fine.
And
Yeah.
I can also see how an intention can be the first experience, but I don't understand the others.
Okay. Attention is where we direct, in order to have a contact with something, we have to have directed our minds toward it. Intention is whether we move forward or back. Perception, I think perception is discrimination, like we know what it is. And then feeling is that positive, negative, and neutral. And contact is the awareness that is present. So all
Okay.
those things have to be present.
So is there any reason why you just only taught about feeling?
Because feeling is most important when we start talking about these misperceptions and these, afflictive emotions. Yeah.
Okay.
But these are all present. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Should we take another one?
Yeah, I will unmute Paul.
Hi, Venerable. Thank you so much. These are very helpful right now, and I'm glad to see that there will be another 2 weeks. I'm looking forward.
Good.
I'm going to ask a question about anger, so I'm sorry that I'm taking us to yesterday's topic, but
It's okay.
yeah. So I was wondering about basically, so for example, if we take like the example of oppression in society, whether that's, based on class or race or gender or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I get feelings in me when confronted with knowledge about stuff like that, that's, from the past or ongoing. And I think it's anger. Well, at least I would label it as anger from like the way that I was taught what anger was in my life.
Sure.
Is that actually anger? Is it righteousness? Like, is there any way that the feeling of like disliking oppression in society can be productive, or is it anger? And if so, should it be transformed into something else to be more productive, to try to think about it, or to think about combating it? Obviously I feel like this is also sort of connected to lack of control over, other people and how they treat others and stuff, but any clarity you could offer would be good.
Yeah. So I think that that you're right. When we see people being unfair, when we see others suffering, we do get angry. And that's actually good information for us, okay, to help us see that things are not right, okay? So I wouldn't want to, push that away and say that's a bad feeling, okay? I wouldn't want to do that, because that's how we've learned to judge in the world, and yeah, and then have effect. Now, if we try to keep that anger burning and still affect the problem, we tend to be not as effective, right? The energy from anger to correct situations, to do what we can to deal with them, is actually, if we come from anger, it's very short-lived. Okay, so someone who doesn't see the separateness, who doesn't see somehow the oppressor as a bad person, okay, someone who, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, sees all beings as wanting to be happy, not wanting to suffer. When they see that suffering, they have compassion immediately. They don't have anger at the person who is doing the oppression. They immediately see that the people who are being oppressed, it's, they're sad about them and they want them to be happy, right? They have compassion for them, and they also have compassion for the oppressor. And then the power of that compassion to try to fix that situation. I'm thinking of Nelson Mandela, who spent 30 years, in prison, and then came out and became the president of South Africa. That's compassion for his people and all the other people. It's not hatred, I don't think. Yeah. And helplessness, I think that's a little harder for me because I haven't worked on it as much. Helplessness, I mean, when we were talking about it yesterday, we were talking about how it's a sense of a belief that we have, that there's a self in here that actually can control things, instead of recognizing that we are so all interdependent. There isn't, it's an illusion to believe that we can control very much.
Right.
And so accepting what we can't control, but then doing what we can. And I think when we get lost in helplessness, we don't necessarily do what we can, because we don't accept what we can't. We get so lost and overwhelmed by the helplessness, we can't have a clear a clear effect of what we can do. And especially within interdependence, our simple act of meditating on loving kindness and compassion has an effect on reality, and we can affect others in that way. That's the basis of prayer.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay, let's do some meditation.
Okay, so everyone please go back to a comfortable position. Set up your posture. Let your body become grounded and stable once again. And as usual, allowing the bell to bring you into the space of the body first. Becoming aware of physical sensations. Giving your awareness a chance to become grounded and stable. Taking a few deep breaths in order to release any tension, any tightness, to let go of worries and concerns in the mind. Allowing the body to go back to its natural state. Simply let it rest and become a good basis, a good foundation for the meditation. And just take a moment to experience that state. Let your body rest. And let your mind observe without any need to do anything. Rather, just being present and aware. And then gently letting go of the space of physical sensations. We bring the attention to the mind in order to do this meditation, contemplate on the different aspects of dependent arising. So take this body of ours. It is what we believe in most as something real from its own side. It is what we cling to most, what we think about most. It is one thing that we take care of most and identify with most. To our hallucinating minds, it is the one thing that is definitely me. But really analyze, how is it my body? It has come into being and continues to exist in dependence upon countless causes and conditions. We cannot find my body among any of those causes, and yet it is nothing other than those causes and conditions. As one teacher says, it can be said that everything in the universe before this body came into being is a valid cause and condition for the existence of this body. So thinking this way, my body began with the egg and the sperm of my kind mother and father. So where is my body? Without the mother and father of my parents, there would be no mother and father. And without my mother and my father, there would be no my body. So where is my body apart from these beginningless mothers and fathers? Without my mother's womb, the egg and the sperm could not join and develop. Without the food that my mother ate every day, the egg and the sperm could not grow into a fetus. So where is my body so independent from the food that she ate? My body is nothing other than a mountain of carrots and potatoes and chicken and bread. Without the earth, the gardener, the sun, the water, the fertilizer, there would be no carrots. Without no carrots, there would be no mother. Without my mother, there could be no my body. It does not exist. My body would not exist without the clothes my mother wore to keep her warm in winter. In turn, the clothes would not exist without the sheep who provided the wool, the sheep shearers, the sheep shearers' mothers, the owners of the sheep, the people who process the wool, the people who turn it into cloth, the truck drivers who took the cloth into the clothes factory, the cloth designers, the tailors, the sewing machines, the designers of the sewing machines, the shops that sold the clothes, the people who made the rags the clothes hung on. Where is my body apart from all of this? Where does it exist so independently? It cannot be found. My body would not exist without the cotton bushes, the people who planted the cotton, the gardeners who nourished the cotton bushes, the people who picked the cotton, the people who drove the trucks that took cotton to be processed, the architect of the factory where the cotton was turned into cloth, the people who turned the cotton into cloth, those who dyed the cloth, the people who made the dye, the person who designed the packet that contained the dye, the printer who printed the packet, the people who made the printing machine. Where is my body apart from all these causes and conditions? My body would not exist without the doctors and nurses who helped it come out of the womb, the soft cloth that protected it and kept it warm, the cot in which it was put to sleep, the milk from my mother's breast, the food that my mother ate that transformed into the milk that nourished my body, the nurses who checked the body while it was sleeping to make sure it did not suffocate, the heating in the hospital that kept my body warm, the electricity that kept the heaters burning, the electricians who did the wiring in the hospital, the colleges that they went to learn how to become electricians, their teachers. Where is my body separate from all these countless causes and conditions? Cannot be found anywhere. My body is nothing other than all the food I ate as a child. The milk, the rice, the peas and lambs, and apples and eggs. My body right now would not exist without the food, the gardeners, the people who track the vegetables to the market, those who sold the vegetables, the people who made the shelves at the market that held the vegetables off the ground, the people who made the stalls at the market, the people who made the shop where they sold the lamb, the person who killed the lamb, the lamb's mother, the people who skinned the lamb, the person who packed it, the person who put it in the refrigerator at the supermarket, the people who made the refrigerator, the people who made the factory where the refrigerator was made. Where is my body apart from all of this? My body would not exist without the mountains of morality practice, which is its main karmic cause. And the morality could have not been practiced without the kindness of the teachers who show the path to the person in a previous life. Without the kindness of Dharma friends, the books in which the teachings were printed, the people who printed the books, the person who designed the typeface used in those books, the people who made the paper, the people who chopped down the trees from which the paper was made, the previous parents, the food that the previous mother ate to nourish their body, so that the previous person could survive and practice morality. In order to create the cause to have my body in this life. So trying to create this awareness of this net of interconnectedness, accepting how we often see our body as something independent, completely separate from the rest. It is clear that there is no my body apart from this beginningless causes and conditions. So what is there to cling to? So contemplating in this way, simply let this awareness of interdependence sink deeper. Knowing how our bodies are connected to so many others, dependent on so many causes and conditions. There is no such thing as an independent, self-existent body that we have. And slowly and gently coming out of the meditation. Once again, becoming aware of your body, of your surroundings. And we go now into the dedication, reading once again from Shantideva's. May all beings everywhere, plagued by the sufferings of body and mind, attain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored and find repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be free from their ailments. Whatever diseases are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I
All right, thank you everyone for coming, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
Yeah. And by the way, to all of you, if you haven't checked, we're posting all the recordings now on our Facebook page. So I'm updating the links after every day for the new recordings. So make sure to check that in order. There's been some people who have been having problems with the Google Drive. So now we have made them available there. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.